Right, thank you for coming along. Okay, this is the first conference talk for quite a long time, so let's see how this goes. Right, so as mentioned, I'm going to talk about what we've been doing on our 180-year-old, can't even say it, 180-year-old landscape. So a quick bit about me and the co-op. So I am a jack of all trades. I've been a software developer, I've been an architect, even an agile, I don't mention it much, but an agile coach occasionally and this sort of thing. 2017, I joined Co-op, as was Co-op Digital as was then, to work with a couple of people that I met through conferences like this sort of thing, Rob Bowley and Gemma Cameron. Co-op-wise, for those of you who don't know the Co-op, it's, as it said, it's 180 years old. It was started in Rochdale by the Rochdale pioneers. It's a consumer cooperative, so it's run for the benefit of the people who buy stuff and, trade with the Co-op. The group has retail. You're probably familiar with the stores. We've got funeral care, insurance, legal, and so on. What we don't have is a bank, because around 2010, something happened, and there's a large hole found in the bank, and we ended up having to sell it off. We've now just about paid down the debt for that. So we don't have a bank, but we have a thriving group. Right, so this talk is, obviously, it's a work of a whole bunch of people that I'm talking about here. It's not just look at what I've done. So there's all people on the teams, other people in the leadership, different bits of leadership in the co-op. But specifically, the person who isn't here today, Mark Harrigan, who's my co-conspirator in a lot of this, it's as much his story as mine. So basically, this is our experience. We don't think there's anything earth-shattering in here, because you folks coming along to a platform conference, you probably know a lot of this stuff. But sharing our experience and seeing if it sort of rings bells or helps people in a similar situation. So split into three bits. There's the lead up. Then there's the as we started to grow it, and then we'll go on to what we've done this year to try and expand it. So 2016 to 2021. Co-op at that time, when I arrived in 2017, it was very much an organisation, technology-wise, of two parts. There was a very traditional per-business set of IT organisations, very sort of traditional project-based, waterfall-y, some notable exceptions, but a lot of it was like, building stuff, data centres, so on. On the other hand, there's Co-op Digital, which was very agile, very product-based, design-led, blah, blah, blah. Cloud first, and was doing a lot of building, a lot of engineering. This was an uneasy détente between these two parts of the organisation during this time period, up to 2021, when the two bits merged to form Co-op Technology. One thing to note about the Co-op Digital side is that there was what we call Digital Tech Ops, which has tried to build a common platform. And I mention this because it'll feature a couple of times as we go through. So it's trying to build a common infrastructure platform, basically, for the digital teams. So where that left us, so we had a mix of teams in the landscape. In 2021, we got anything from very, almost like you build it, you run it teams on the one end of the spectrum, through to very transient project teams, build something, hand it over to the support group, and then disappear, and all points in between. The landscape, we've got over 2,000 bricks and mortar stores, so there's the associated logistics and warehousing, this sort of thing. It's effectively a 24-hour operation, and it's quite different from a pure digital product in the cloud. We had a lot of paper standards. We still have a lot of paper standards. There's standards, policies, blah, blah, the guardrails, and so on. Not only that, so all the teams are supposed to conform to these, and therefore they've got to, have read all these things and internalised all these things and so on, and so therefore a lot of cognitive load. But also, many of these standards and policies are written in what we term legalese. They make sense to the person who's writing it, they make sense to the people who are working in that group that helped to write it, but they're not really that great to consume downstream. So, again, it's really difficult, it's a lot of cognitive load for the delivery teams. We also had a problem where we've got around the makeup of the people. So we've got some people who've been there for a long time. They've had a lot of time to absorb this. So we've got a whole bunch of perms in the landscape. We've also got a whole bunch of third parties and the revolving door that comes with that. So, it's difficult. If you're relying on this stuff being in people's heads, it's very difficult to keep that landscape effective. And as it says at the bottom, we've got significant amounts of technical debt, significant amounts of risk, just built up over the years, rolling, as it goes. So, platforms then. We had some platform footprint, but the various teams that acted as platforms. If you squint at them, they look like a platform. The only thing is that largely they were servicing stuff behind the ticketing system. So a lot of the stuff that you asked for, you never actually saw the people doing the work. All you did is put a ticket in, and hopefully you got the right thing out, which is not always the case. Also, the other model we found was that arms and legs. So basically, we'd have people who were, the projects were like, I want 1 day of a platform engineer or infrastructure engineer per week for the next 10 weeks. And it's just time slicing of people, which again, it doesn't, it's not what we see as being effective. There were some bits of modern platform thinking. So we had, for example, our One Web platform. It was there before I arrived. It's been there for 10 years. And so the pockets of things that were running a bit like platforms. We had some data platforms, similar sort of thing. The challenge was that they keep getting buffeted. The One Web platform ended up having to own and run a completely different application for a time, which really made it veer off from its purpose of providing web-based services. So the landscape was patchy in terms of platforms, and hadn't really delivered on what the intention was. Because this also comes back to the digital tech ops platform. That we wanted to do that, wanted to get a solid base, but it didn't work out. So the things from that stage, what we think worked. Digital tech ops did manage to shield the engineers from a lot of complexity. They could take on board all the policies and standards and so on and say, look, as an engineer, if you do this thing, and this thing, you'll be all right. We had the landscape, the digital landscape was AWS-based. We basically ran up a couple of accounts for people, gave them the keys and said, there you go, you own that, and then you can do what you need to do in there. That worked really well in terms of the flexibility. But obviously, that's part of the thing that then undermined our ability to create a platform because people would just veer off in different directions. Sharing Terraform across teams worked. Although we didn't create a platform, we managed to get a lot of sharing going between the teams. And also we had what you might call human anti-corruption layers. So we had some people like representatives from InfoSec and procurement and so on that would help us navigate bits of the organisation, so we could focus on building at that time the digital. My brain's going. So the culture on building the digital applications and the digital capability that we had. This is the thing when you get to my age, you start to drift off. Right. What didn't work? Okay. So the common platform, the TechOps common platform, didn't work. Again, as I say, there's too much divergence, too much pressure in different places, and it didn't hang together. We didn't have enough people in the middle to make it hang together. There was also a slightly related IT platform, cloud platform, that was being spun up. That worked for the model that it was targeted at, which was a bunch of people, potentially rolling into co-op, not knowing the landscape, and therefore they needed to be in a very confined box. But that really didn't work when it hit the you build it, you run it type mindset people that we were bringing in. So that was a frictional boundary. And the same is true where the product teams and projects, the ways of working, the assumptions just didn't work when they hit each other. The other thing was that we don't think worked was the platform teams hidden behind those ticketing systems. Sometimes you had to submit tickets 2 or 3 times to get the right outcome, which is just waste on all angles. So what do we do? Right. Well, making a start, 2021 to 2025. The people involved in this we knew this stuff. We'd walked into the organization with a bunch of this stuff in our heads. So team topologies, we knew it. We'd been there, to have read the book, tried it in different organizations, and this sort of thing. Videos from conferences like this, people sharing their understanding about platforms and how this sort of stuff can work. It's great. Gregor's platform strategy book, Gregor Hober's platform strategy book, is a great read. I read it a couple of years ago, and it's like, this is great, sort of like learnings and so on. So all this stuff we could build on. We knew the stuff. Obviously, the thing on the right. What's the thing on the right? No, what is participate then? Right. So Netflix paved roads. So we know that's that's a thing. So all of this stuff was like, we know about this stuff. How can we apply it? We also knew a lot, because of coming particularly from the digital side, we knew a lot about products and doing stuff as products. All the teams on the digital side were set up as product teams. So, all this stuff about customer segmentation, user research, customer feedback on your products, evolving your products, all that sort of stuff. It was like, yeah, we know this. This is how we think the world should work. But it's not what we're seeing in different places. So we got some parts of the puzzle. So we got a vision of what we wanted. All that sort of stuff is like, that's where we want to be. We had some standards. We owned some standards, so engineering standards and so on. We had ownership of. So potentially we can use it as the underpinning for the platform, the shaping of the platform. We had an internal market, a candidate internal market of various what we term friendlies. So basically, teams that are populated with engineers who had largely been recruited into the co-op by this wider group of people over time, over the past 10 years. So we knew that they also had a whole bunch of this sort of thinking and mindset. So potentially we can sell it into them. We don't have to persuade them about it in order to then sell them on the benefits. Most importantly, we had a small bit of the digital tech ops. So some of the technologies carried through, and some of the team carried through to give us the basis of building about our platform offering. Now, we had a false start on this. We said, okay, this could either be an engineering-y type thing, or it can be a more platform-y type thing with existing platform teams. We chose wrong to start with. We put it in with the existing platform teams who worked in a different way. Therefore, we had to back it out, spin it up, and rebrand it. So engineering productivity, as it was rebranded, that's the team that's part of our existing landscape. Okay, so we said, right, well, we want to do this stuff, but how do we make sure we've got an ongoing funding? How do we get buy-in for it? So one of the things that the new CTO, particularly at the time, was keen on was measurement, and because I think that he felt he'd not got enough handle on how this system he'd inherited works. So he wanted to get some measurement. We have DORA metrics that we can get from the tooling. So one of the key bits of tooling was build pipelines that that digital tech ops team inherited. So great, we can get that stuff out of there. We can add some other bits into, do a bit of hacking into Jira and get some other bits of the DORA metrics out. So we can provide measurement, and that's the hook. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we wanted to do, but there's no point, the one thing that was of interest was measurement, so fine, that's our sell. So apply the thinking from all that good wisdom into what we do next. So engineering productivity had inherited a self-hosted GitLab that covered about 40–50% of the estate. We had some GitLab and some DevOps. We wanted to deliver something, that actually get something in the hands of customers and get the iteration going. So because of that, we said, okay, let's be opinionated. I'm using the royal we here, it's the distance from a lot of this decision-making with the team. But, be opinionated, CI/CD based on GitLab only. We'll deal with DevOps, that's tomorrow's problem. That startup-style thinking was a key part of this, because there's no point in saying, we'll try and boil the ocean, do all this stuff, have a solution for everybody, and then it just all falls into the sand because you end up with not getting agreement and so on. We saw this time and time again. So it's like, okay, let's start with the market segment, hit that market segment, sell ourselves to those people, get satisfied customers and good stories, and then roll outwards from there. And also, start to treat it more as a product. So transition it to GitLab SaaS, freed up some capacity, to free up at least one person's capacity, because otherwise they were dealing with all the self-hosting stuff we had to do. So what we think worked from that period, small autonomous team focusing on a small set of issues. Who'd have thought that that would be a good, positive thing, eh? Yeah, internal customers. So working with those internal customers that some of the people in the engineering productivity team had been in some of those teams. So they knew the people. They could go and talk to them and persuade them on to start to take up the project. But also getting into that listening, going and working with them, working out what they needed and providing that for them. So the internal customers had direct access, the Slack channel to fire stuff at the engineering productivity team. For ad hoc support. So again, as per some of the SRE session earlier on, that generated a lot of traffic and a lot of interest and sort of things. Oh, right, okay, this is the sort of thing people are concerned about, and people could get answers quickly. This team weren't hidden behind a ticketing system. And as much self-serve as we could concoct, that's Mark's term. Ideally make it as self-serve as possible. Again, it's only a small team, 3 or 4 people. You just don't have the bandwidth to do a whole load of toil stuff, as well as building additional bits and automating stuff. So what didn't work for us, as I say, having that team that was really trying to work in a startup style way under a more formal platform team. And also stakeholder aspirations, that people wanted everything. They wanted the whole set of different platformy things, and they want it across the whole of the estate. Our estate, we've got a big chunk of SAP, we've got a big, chunks of other sort of SaaS products, some products that were the form like data center in the cloud, so we've moved to be data center in the cloud. I've got to get my teeth right eventually. It's a whole different landscape. And yes, some of the things, hitting some of those things would have given us a big payback, but the lift to get there was huge. Therefore, that we just can't, it's like, we're not going to address that. We're not even going to think about that at the moment. We'll work in a specific market segment. Right, scaling up. So this is where we said, okay, it's great we've got one team working in this sort of way. Can we scale it? So this is what we've done recently. I'm not expecting people to read this. This is not an ICE test. I don't work for Specsavers. Basically, we spent a whole bunch of time. This is like working through a model. What do we think our model looks like? And I'm quite happy to talk this through with people afterwards rather than going through this. But a couple of important bits. One is about the target market. So we knew there were teams out there that could do this stuff themselves. If we talk about things like APIs, for example, they could do APIs themselves. What they couldn't necessarily do is know how to do co-op styly APIs. And the same is true of like build pipelines. They could do the build pipelines themselves, but they didn't necessarily want to be doing the build pipelines. So what we said was, okay, they have different markets, bits of the market. One way of slicing and dicing was the people who can build this stuff themselves. They can do it. They just don't need any help. They need the occasional bit of advice and guidance. Then assisted build, people who need a bit of assistance doing it the first time in co-op way, but then they can roll from themselves onwards after that. And then subcontractor build, people who can't or won't, for whatever reason, do it themselves. It may not make sense for the organisation economically to spin up, if somebody's got like one API to produce for their area, do they really need 3 or 4 engineers to just huddle around that one API to keep it running? Sometimes this stuff doesn't make sense. So we said, okay, well, ideally we want to focus on those self-build, assisted build, because that's where a lot of our friendlies were. So that was our market. Also, in terms of the capabilities, we said, okay, there's enabling stuff, which is great. There's also what we term tooling. So this is all the self-serve stuff. Where people can just take away. Very light touch for the team. Ideally, that's how the team can scale themselves. And then managed, the capability. So the thing where you're doing the thing for people. Now, again, we didn't rule out any of this stuff, but we said that if the stuff in the red, the self-build teams and the enabling and tooling, those are the places we want to play. And ideally, don't play in the other places, because that will take us more effort, because they're less scalable generally. So, the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to keep the team small. So preference was for 4 plus or minus 1 teams. Now, traditionally, in some parts of our world, they had teams that had one of everything. One of each of the design groups, the UX and this sort of thing. We had two each of the different engineers, because you needed 2 pairs of eyes on every piece of code that went into production. Delivery manager, product manager. Your minimum team size became 13, and it's like, this is nuts. On the other end, we had some areas of the landscape were spinning up, a project manager and a couple of devs, and that's your team. It's like, okay, on the one hand, on the big team, we've got all the skills, but the team's too big. On the other hand, we've got a smaller team, but they don't have the skills. So we took the inspiration from Emily Webber and Capability Cone and Kent Beck's Paint Drip people, and said, well, hang on. As it says at the top, we have got a whole bunch of differently skilled individuals here. They're not just fungible units. So what we thought was, okay, let's see what the small teams can do for themselves, but give them assistance to do the rest of it. So we spun up what we call the pit crew. So this is still an experiment. This is still the work in progress, where they've got capability for product management, delivery management, and so on. And they can help the teams out by providing, they can coach the teams so the teams can learn to do some of the thing themselves. They can provide specific assistance. It's like, oh, can you just come and run this road mapping session for us? Because none of us know how to do it. It's not a skill. You do it really well. Or doing the thing. Like nobody in the team wants to do the retrospective stuff. They're really rubbish at it. Nobody's got that feeling that they want to do it. So could you just do them for us? Every couple of weeks. Any of that stuff, and what's needed will depend on team to team, depending on the group of people, the particular group of people. So we gathered together some sibling teams. This is not all of the platform teams on the landscape, but this is the set that seemed to fit the most closely together. So we had OneWeb, the web platform team that's been around for quite a time. Engineering productivity, I've mentioned, there's largely doing stuff around developer experience, CI/CD, and so on. API enablement, which was forged in Fire last year as a small team, and quality enablement. So those 4 teams, and we got ideas of what other teams there might be in the space, but we wanted to get these ones running and ideally grow other teams out of them rather than just stand up a completely separate team. We said, okay, what's our direction? We need to be clear direction. One of the things that OneWeb had struggled with for quite a time, because it had been bounced around bits of the organisation, was of clarity of direction. Given we're setting up a platform area, we could say, this is, your job, our vision is making the delivery of value better, safer, faster, happier. Yeah, hat tip to Jonathan Smart for the alliteration of things, but slightly different variant. And we said, okay, the impact we want, so we want to increase value delivery by reducing the load on teams, both the actual load of having to do stuff, so we can provide them with tools that will do the stuff, but also the cognitive load, so getting rid of all that, the having to know all the policies and standards. The other part of it is reducing the tech debt, the risk on the landscape. This is like customers and stakeholders. The customers, the people consuming our products, we think will be interested in the thing on the left, increasing the capacity. The stakeholders who we need on board to keep funding it will be interested in the thing on the right, taking risk out of the estate. And we think we can achieve both of those. So our initial measures, adoption rates, customer happiness, and reduction of tech debt and risk. We'll come back to in a few minutes. So again, iTest, you're not intended to read through this. What we did was for each of the teams, because there are different stages of evolution. So for each of the teams, we did what we call a product assessment. So we went through, it's an adapted business model canvas for people who are familiar with those. So what we did was said, okay, what's your purpose? Are you clear on what your purpose is? And does it ladder up to what I've just shown on the previous slide? Who are your customers and who are your stakeholders? What are your offerings, so products or services? And then how do they match to those customers and stakeholders? Which ones do they serve and what do they provide for them? And if necessary, we could use the value proposition canvas like the one on the top right. Again, it's part of the business model canvas family to say, what are these people trying to do? What is your offering? And how does it give them a benefit, or how does it take some pain away from their world? And then once we've got that, we can say, right, which of those offerings give the most value to the co-op? And how does that match with your roadmap? Right, so get your prioritization right. And then finally, are you actually equipped to do this? If you want to deliver this stuff in this time frame, do you have the capacity and the capability? Okay, so there are additional heuristics for the teams. Work with your friendlies. Don't try and boil the ocean. Also, expand your existing offerings. Don't try and create a whole bunch of new stuff. Have you saturated the market for your existing offerings? Do all the teams that could use your offerings or use your offerings? If not, focus on getting them, why they're not using them, and getting them to be more broadly accepted. Similarly, can you work with teams to get up to migrate them onto your offerings or onto the latest versions? So again, make sure that you're providing that good stuff, maximizing this existing investment. So a few last things on measurement. So adoption rate. The adoption rate was like our baseline standard to start with was that at least one product from one of the technology enablement teams used by a given delivery team. That would count as being adoption as a starter. We've got a thing called the engineering ecosystem where we worked with the engineering function had developed about how essentially the left-hand two columns are what we term the friendlies and the right-hand two columns are what we term the wider organization. So what we did was the teams did some digging, got some figures together. We found that in mid-24, it was 72% coverage on that criteria of at least one product from one of the teams. By mid-25, it was 100%. Great, we've hit 100%. Let's now raise the bar. So next year it'll be okay. Do 2 products, or and probably 2 products from at least 2 of the teams. And so we changed the measure. Tech debt and risk, always a bit difficult to work out how to measure it. We were lucky we had what we call engineering health checks. We've been running a manual check every year. It's like it's a facilitated self-assessment for the teams. So we had all that for pretty much all the friendly teams. So what we could do is we could turn that into numerical value, and map that against the number of products that those teams were taking from technology enablement teams. Hopefully, the more offerings they're taking, the less tech debt and risk they'll have. So we should see a correlation. And cross fingers, do the mapping. Yeah, we got a correlation. So the more products they took, the better their tech debt and risk stance was. Again, this is useful stuff for our stakeholders. Customer happiness, we've got user researchers to hand. We talked to user researchers. They gave us some very useful help. We put together some questions we wanted to do as an initial questionnaire. We were about to fire that out, and then something happened. Unfortunately, the last 6 months has been a little bit of a challenge in terms of getting stuff through. So things are getting better now. We are, able to pick this back up and do our survey in the not too distant future. But yeah, this has somewhat slowed down our experiment. But hey, we've still got a business we're working with, so that's a big plus. Whether all this works or not, who knows? We will know more next year. So hopefully we'll come along next year and update you on where all this has taken us. And that's that. Thank you.